Cape Cod Broadcasting weaves the listening environments of 99.9 WQRC, Ocean 104.7, WFCC Classical 107.5, Cape Country 104, and CapeCon.com's website experience to reflect the lifestyles of the people who live, work, and play on Cape Cod. We hope that you enjoy this podcast.
I'm Laura Reckford, and this is Sunday Journal. We are going in depth on the ballot questions in advance of the November 4th election. Question number 2 would expand the beverage container deposit law, known as the bottle bill. If the ballot question is passed, it would expand the bottle bill to include plastic water bottles, and it would mean that people could turn in non-alcoholic, non-carbonated drinks for deposit. The current bottle bill applies to beer or soda. We're talking about both sides of this issue on today's program. This first segment will cover the arguments for the ballot question, that is, in favor of expanding the bottle bill to include water bottles. I'm speaking with Richard Elrick, who is the energy coordinator for the towns of Bourne and Barnstable. Richard Elrick, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Laura. It's a pleasure to be here.
Why don't we start by you introducing yourself to listeners, telling them how you are involved on this issue?
Yes, as you pointed out, I do work as the energy coordinator for both the towns of Bourne and Barnstable, and I served previously as an elected official for the town of Barnstable, where I served 3 terms in that capacity. I have been, for my whole adult life, interested in renewable energy, energy efficiency efforts, and in recycling, and was a big supporter of the original bottle bill when it was passed in 1982. But since that time, a number of other new kinds of containers have come onto the market. As you pointed out, water bottles are prolific. They're everywhere. Sports drinks and many other types of containers. Approximately, so the studies have shown somewhere in the range of 1 billion to 1.5 billion new containers are now around that were not included in the original bottle bill. So I'm, again, very excited about the opportunity to expand the bottle bill. I know you'll get into some of the reasons that it makes sense and why I support it, but that's a little bit about my background.
And then just as you said, getting right into why you think voters should vote yes on this ballot question, question number 2, to expand the bottle bill.
Well, I support the expansion of the bottle bill for essentially the same reasons I supported the original bottle bill many years ago, and that is because it serves as the very best way, the most effective way to reduce the trash and litter that these bottles are causing. At the same time, it leads to the increase in recycling. There's some other elements about the bottle bills increasing, or I should say the expanded bottle bill, that I think it's important for folks to know. Probably most importantly is it reduces litter. They have found very clearly with the statistics and the data that for that 80% of all bottles that have a deposit on it get recycled, whereas currently we're lucky to see as much as 23% of the non-deposit bottles get recycled. So it's clear that whatever is happening now is not serving as an effective way to reduce litter and increase recycling, particularly among these other bottles. A couple of other points I think that are important to know. Our cities and towns spend somewhere in the range of $4 to $7 million a year picking up and disposing of these beverages. Towns shouldn't have this burden, and the consumers shouldn't have the burden either. The burden for these costs should be on the manufacturers, and that's exactly where the bottle bill would put those costs. The other good thing to mention here is currently, under the status quo, all of the monies that come in that are not redeemed end up going to the general fund. Under the bottle bill, under the expanded bottle bill, a new clean environment fund would be created, and the unredeemed monies that come in would go to that fund, and I think that's really important. And those are some of the highlights of why I support it, and I think it's also maybe makes some sense for you and I to talk about these ads that the opponents have run in opposition to the bill and how much misinformation is being laid on the public.
Well, let's get right into that. We were talking a little bit about that before the show here. Fill us in on what's going on with the advertising.
Well, it's really for a good government type like myself, Laura, it's been very discouraging to see the impact that all of the monies that the opponents have put into this anti-expanded bottle bill campaign, all of the money that's been put in, according to the latest information, opponents primarily led by the American Beverage Association, have spent more than $8 million, primarily with ads that are filled with misinformation, and that's compared to the approximately $700,000 that have supporters have spent in favor of Question 2. And some of the points that they've raised that just are devious and untrue, quite frankly. One of the arguments you hear them make is that 90% of residents now have curbside recycling programs, and therefore we don't need the bottle bill. Well, that's been clearly shown to be inaccurate. Only 47% of cities and towns have curbside programs. But even if you grant that point, we can see that the current curbside program, to the degree that it's successful, has clearly not been as successful as the bottle bill has been in reducing the amount of containers based on the data we already discussed. They also talk about how the beverage prices are going to be much higher with the bottle bill. Well, that hasn't been the case in towns that have bottle bill, I should say in states that have bottle bills right now. And for example, in New Hampshire, they don't have a bottle bill, but their beverage costs are similar to ours. And the other point I'd make there is that in 1983, after the first bottle bill passed, we didn't see an increase in the costs of beverages. And to the degree that some people would call it a tax, quite frankly, I think that's sort of absurd. If all I had to do was bring back my bottle to redeem my nickel, I don't think I'd comfortably be able to call that a tax. Clearly, you can get your money back, and in many cases, folks bring their empty containers to the landfill, and they donate the redeemable containers to the Boy Scouts or some other charitable cause. So, lots of information. Sadly, at least the recent polls are showing the opponents are having some effect. We went from a point of having better than 60% in favor of Question 2. Now it's much less than that. So in just 2 months' time, the $8 million that the opponents have spent has made a difference. We hope, those of us who are in favor of Question 2, hope over the next month or so we can sort of respond to the misinformation and the false advertising that is in the opponents' ads and convince people that reducing litter, increasing recycling, all of the good things that the bottle bill will do are necessary just as they have, as it has been necessary when the bottle bill was first proposed.
I'm Laura Reckford, and this is Sunday Journal. I'm talking with Richard Elrick, who is speaking in favor of Ballot Question 2, which would expand the bottle bill. Now, you got into, I think, one of the main arguments of the opponents a little bit. Maybe we can expand on it a little bit here. What do you say to this argument that they say it will cost grocers an enormous amount and that will be passed on to consumers? You already mentioned how that seems not to really pan out with other states, but maybe you could get into that a little more. That seems to be the main argument.
Well, I think that's the case. And the additional costs that are required to implement the expanded bill at the grocery stores, some of the monies that are included in the 5-cent charge are passed back to grocery stores, for example, to do this necessary work. It's really the manufacturers of the beverages that would bear the burden and the additional costs. This argument that somehow these extra costs are going to be transferred onto the consumers, as I say, just has not been borne out by the facts and the data that we have to date. The inflation didn't occur in beverages in 1983, and in all of the states that surround bottle bill states, prices are either the same for their beverages or actually a little higher in non-bottle bill states. And I think that's partly because of the way that these large manufacturers of beverages, the Cokes and the Pepsis of the world, they create their pricing not town by town or state by state, but in a regional sense. So at least the data does not support this argument that prices are going to go up. And certainly for the consumer, if all it takes is that you return your bottles to get that cost back, that nickel per container, I think that you should feel fairly confident that it shouldn't be a burden on you. The other thing, the inflationary thing, even if to the degree that the commissioner of DEP or the person who has the flexibility after 5 years to look at whether the cost of the deposit should be increased, even if they do follow the consumer price index, we wouldn't see the point reached where the deposit went from a nickel to a dime until the year 2050. But again, there's nothing automatic. That's another misstatement that was included in this advertising, that it would be an automatic increase every 5 years. The legislation doesn't say that, and I doubt that would be the case. Certainly, facts don't support that.
Now, another thing the opponents say is that the bottle bill targets less than 1% is the figure they give of the waste stream, yet it adds a lot of costs. $68 million is, I think, their number to the grocery costs. What do you say to those figures?
Well, I don't have not had an opportunity to review where their figures come from. I can only report from past experience in the original bottle bill. Their arguments at that time were the same as they are now, and they weren't borne out. I just think that, again, depending on what you use for a source for information, and indeed it was just in today's paper that the opponents paid an author of one of their studies, $7,000, and so there was some connection as to the reliability of the data and the information the opponents were using. But just the statistic, which I think even they would agree with, about the 80% of bottles being recycled that have deposits on them, and barely 20 to 22% get recycled without a deposit. That suggests that there's a lot of litter out there. And the numbers that you cited do not take into account the costs of the cities and towns for having to deal with the cleanup of that after the fact. So I guess I would say that I don't have confidence that their data is accurate. I think you get a greater return on the effort than the 1% reduction in trash that they're talking about, again, based on what was our experience in 1983 when the original bottle bill was passed.
Another argument, they say the money actually doesn't go to environmental causes. You had mentioned this new fund that it would go to, and they say, well, traditionally over the years, the legislators have sort of rated the fund that was supposed to be for environmental causes, so there's no guarantee that it would go where they say it's going to go.
Well, while I wouldn't disagree that nothing seems to be permanent in politics, this legislation is different than the original bottle bill, gives much more support in the language of the bill itself in terms of maintaining the environmental fund. I think that there are more safeguards in this present legislation. And I think, again, I can't guarantee what the legislature is going to do, but I think we at least get to be in a better position than we are now. Under the current program, all of that money is going into the general fund. Under the bottle bill, at least until if you're as cynical as many people are these days, and you think tomorrow the legislature would change it and send all that money back to the general fund, I think at least it sets the precedent that this green fund is this clean environment fund is established, and I think it's going to take a lot more chutzpah than most of our current legislators have to, at this stage of the game, based on what's happened, to throw that money back into the general fund. But I'm not a legislator. I'm not pretending to be able to predict the future. But I think that's a pretty weak argument.
And unfortunately, we're out of time. I've been talking with Richard Elrick, who is advocating voting in favor of Question 2 on the November 4th ballot, which would expand the bottle bill. Richard Elrick, thank you for being with us today.
It's been my pleasure, Laura.
I'm Laura Reckford, and this is Sunday Journal.
This podcast is a presentation of Cape Cod Broadcasting, which is solely responsible for its content. Thank you for listening. For more information, please visit us at capecodbroadcasting.com.